Ms. Francois, welcome and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Last evening, as I began to think about the fact that we would resume a conversation that had begun earlier, I was reminded of a quote by Albert Einstein, and he said, "Setting an example is not the main means of influencing people. Setting an example is the only means." And we'd like to try and share the example of your life with some of the brothers and sisters who likely will view this conversation, especially young people. So if you would permit me, I'd like you to share something, not of yourself, but of your parents, because it's my understanding that they were the architects of those experiences that made you who you are.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to say that I find it incredibly humbling and incredibly inspiring, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that thinking of me brings to mind Albert Einstein. That's kind of a really huge thing to say, and I'm blushing. You can't tell, but I'm blushing. So with respect to my upbringing and how I ended up being in the position that I'm in right now and doing what I do right now, first of all, I want to make clear that I am an assistant district attorney, and I work in New York County, and it is, by my reasoning, the best job in the world. It's not just a job, it's a calling, and it allows me to take the best part of the American system and bring it to everybody, and that's really important to me as a woman and as a Black woman. And I love sharing with others how I got here. And so, I mean, if you have specific questions, I'll definitely answer specific questions, or if you just...
Well, I do have specific questions, but I recall in an earlier conversation, you're talking about the odyssey, the struggle that it was for your parents when they immigrated from Haiti to come here. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think you shared a story of your mother being pregnant with either you or your older sister, and because your father and mother had been separated, she had to sleep in an abandoned building.
Right.
And your father subsequently was able to come over.
Correct.
And that experience in and of itself, it left an indelible impression on me for a number of reasons. For your parents to have produced you and your siblings, all of whom are men and women of substance and of achievement, that example is something that I think we all need to hear about. So specifically what I wanted to ask you with regards to your mother and father is, can you share something of what it took for them to come here and what it took for them to nurture and shape you so that you could become the person that you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually am really proud to tell my parents' story. It makes me appreciate where I am right now, and it makes me kind of appreciate them and what my responsibilities are to the future. So I love telling their story. My parents are Haitian. They were born there, so I'm Haitian American. I was born here, they were born there. And they were lucky enough, my mom was lucky enough to be able to come here. But when she came here, she had, of course, there was my father at the time, they had already married, and bringing my father over was possible. It was just, there was a lot that had to be done before that could happen. And so in order to facilitate their assimilation into the United States, my mom was able to come first, and at the time that she came in, she was expecting my older sister, who is a really great person, and one of my personal inspirations. So my mother was expecting my older sister, and she came here not really having any real place to go, not really knowing how she was going to make it, only knowing that this was a land of opportunity. She tells stories, which I don't think I ever mentioned, given how many times I've come down and spoken with the students. My mom tells these stories where she says, I really thought the streets were lined with gold. I really thought that the sidewalks would be sparkling with diamonds, such that, I don't know if you know the Rockefeller Center area, the streets, how they have that sparkle. I don't do.
I know exactly what you're
My
talking about.
mother literally went there, and she was just in awe. All the things that she had heard in her mind were true. Oh my God, the streets are lined in diamonds. She thought the sparkling was actually diamonds, which I think is very dear now. But I'm trying to imagine my mother at 19 years old going through this and thinking this huge country where there's so much possibility, she's here alone. She doesn't even know how to take advantage of it. It's so overwhelming. So I'm sorry. Am I going on and on?
You're fine. You're fine.
I'm
just relishing all of this.
Okay. I adore and worship my parents, which is something that I guess I ooze. I think they're just phenomenal human beings, and I marvel at their sacrifices. So when my mother came here, like you said, she didn't have any place to stay, and she's with child, and so she basically is staying in anywhere where she could actually make shelter. She has my sister, and is working, doing menial labor, anything she can get whatsoever, because her priority was taking care of my sister. So she did all types of jobs, from housekeeping to I can't even run the gambit, but pretty much any menial job that you can think of, my mother did in order to save money. And finally, she saves enough money to afford renting a basement apartment where she lived with my older sister. And the only furnishing that they had was a mattress that she dragged in off of the street before the garbage collection came and took it. She dragged it in off the street, and that's what she slept on. At some point, my father was able to join them, and so both of them were basically doing whatever jobs that they could to support their one daughter at that time. And for my father, he did everything from messenger to any sort of real estate job that he could do. I remember the messenger job, not fully understanding what that meant he was physically doing, but remembering that he would say, well, I'm a messenger. Now, as an adult, I look back and I'm thinking, my dad was a messenger? Like, my dad was going on the trains with those bags, carrying packages and delivering them, going in through the back door, not allowed to go in through the front door. That, to me, though, as I'm proud that he was able to do that and willing to do all that, I look at my father and I think he's a king. He's an absolute king, and I think, I'm sorry, I'm getting all emotional, thinking my king was going through the back door, and it kind of makes me emotional. But anyway, so that's basically the origin in the United States.
See, one of the reasons why I wanted to begin this conversation with that story is I can relate to that on a very visceral level. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia. My parents had 12 kids, and they virtually were sharecroppers. And I remember as a young man holding on to my mother's skirt as she was going to pick cotton in a cotton field.
Wow.
I remember segregation, and it's not that I'm some old man, I remember that as if it was yesterday. And yet they were able to struggle and give me the wherewithal to survive so that I could sit here and have this conversation with you.
Right.
And see, as I listen to you, because I'm very emotional about it also, I think about that quote when Albert Einstein said, setting an example is not the main means, it's the only means to influence people. And the purpose of this conversation is to influence those, hopefully, that will see it, to inspire them, to encourage them. And that's why your example is so important. I wanted to kind of lay some kind of framework for you, for my conversation with you and about you, by getting some sense of that from which you come. I mean, I know that all of your siblings have achieved some phenomenal things. So can you just kind of tell me something about them? And
Absolutely. I have the utmost respect for all of my siblings. They're remarkable people. There are 5 of us, and as we discussed at some earlier lecture, my parents were Roman Catholic, so they followed the Roman Catholic mandate, which is you marry and you go forth and multiply, and that's what they knew because they were ardent Catholics when we were growing up. So they had 5 of us, and they were constantly instilling us with a source of pride and a source of social responsibility. It was very important to my parents for us to have a sense of social responsibility. So much so that I had no understanding that other people didn't share that same sense. It took me a while as an adult to understand, well, no, that's unique. That's not how everybody is. It was quite shocking to discover that that's not how everybody is. My older sister is an attorney, and she recently decided that she, after spending many, many years as a corporate attorney, in order to enable the rest of us to go through school, she decided that, okay, now she's going to start doing things that are more her personal liking, as opposed to she spent about 14 years of her life working as a corporate attorney, not liking it very much, liking it some days and not so much other days, but she spent about 14 years of her life being a corporate attorney so that she can help the rest of us go through school. She finally decided, okay, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to become a doctor because that's what I really want. And so that's what she's doing right now, which I have so much respect for, because she's a mother, she's an older woman, she's older than me, and I'm turning 40 tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And I can't believe I just put that on camera, that I'm turning 40 tomorrow. So that's my older sister. Then there's myself, and as you know, I'm a prosecutor in New York County. And then there's my brother right after me. He is a doctor. He went back to school, and even though he is and was at the time an accomplished doctor, he went back to school to become a lawyer. And so now he's a lawyer as well. And then there's my little brother, who is a professor. And then there's my little sister, the baby. She's in her early 20s. The baby who graduated from Yale and is now receiving her acceptance letters for medical schools that she's hopefully going to decide which one she wants to go to. So that's who we are now. Took a lot for us to get there, but that's who we are now.
Well, see, this is what makes this story so profound in my mind. Your parents had some formula which produced you. And as I look across the landscape of where we are now as a people, not just people of color, but generally speaking, unfortunately, I think there's a paucity of understanding of how to, in fact, create individuals who are sensitive, number one, to their fellow man, and have the wherewithal to contribute something to the language of human experience. And hence, that's why I wanted to get some sense of your parents. What can you say to parents, or what would you say to someone who might say to you, Ms. Francois, how was your father and mother, how were they able to produce you? What would you say to them?
What I would say is that they gave unconditional love, though they were very, very, very strict disciplinarians, and also they taught us from a very young age, both by example and in their constant conversations with us, they taught us that you're entitled to nothing. You work for everything. And you have a responsibility to produce, because other people came before you, and the work that they did allows you to be able to better yourself. And that's something that's a theme that followed us throughout our childhood and into our adulthood, that the world owes you nothing. You owe your fellow man, and you owe it to the world to make the world a better place. And that is a responsibility that at first as a child you don't fully understand the immensity of, and you don't understand the scope of it, and you don't understand how that's shaping you as a person. But then like I said, my parents are Haitian, and Haiti has gone through some tough times. And my parents were never those type of parents who sheltered us from the harsh realities of human behavior and scarce resources. And so there was a constant feeling of, my God, I'm so fortunate. Even in the worst portions of our disenfranchisement or our economic situation, there was this feeling of, I'm so fortunate. I'm so fortunate. And that's something that I have to share with others. I have a responsibility to share with others. And when you are given this parameter, this outline, where it's made clear to you that you're bigger than just yourself, you're part of this bigger thing, this greater diaspora, that drives you. And no matter what else is being thrown at you, you know you're part of this greater thing. And this greater thing that's called humanity, and this greater thing that's called your brethren, and this greater thing that is being female, being African American, being of color, being in the United States, and contributing back to that same diaspora. That's something that's really, really, really held close to all of our hearts. And that, I think, allowed us not to diverge. We would look at, let's say, Martin Luther King, we'd look at Gandhi, we'd look at Malcolm X, and we think these people sacrificed themselves to such an extreme. Their lives, they sacrificed for strangers. And because they made those sacrifices, I can do other things that make me happy. I can do that. They didn't know me, they didn't know I would exist, but they did these things for man. I have no right to not try. I have no right to do less. I just don't have that right. That's my responsibility as a human being. And that guides you.
You know, it's a struggle to try and communicate what you've just said to young people oftentimes. And one of the reasons why I'm humble that you consent to come back to this village every time I make the request, every time the request is made, is that I think that perhaps if, you know, there's a Hebrew proverb which says, whosoever saves as much as one life earns as much merit as if he had saved the entire world. Mm-hmm. So I often think that in your coming, if you touch just one of these young ladies and young men, it's all worthwhile. Because as I began to say, for me, it's oftentimes frustrating to try and communicate with these young people the exact same things that you've just said. I remember on one of the previous visits when you were here, there was a young lady who acted in a way that was perhaps undesirable, and I recall your saying to me, it's a shame. I don't know if you remember the incident. But anyway, oftentimes, my experience, unfortunately, distills down to those situations when brothers and sisters simply don't understand that, you know, you have an obligation, that you should study, that you should respect your elders, that you should respect your peers. And that behavior leads them to some things that unfortunately are detrimental to them individually and us collectively. And as a prosecutor, I know that it must break your heart, because I'm sure you're seeing so many good-looking black men who have so much potential, and yet they are walking down a path that will lead to no good end. How do you reconcile that with your spirit, as sensitive as you are, and how do you? And I know it's not your job. You're not a sociologist. How do you communicate the necessity of trying to reform one's behavior so that you could perhaps correct and become someone who contributes to the betterment of mankind? That might be
that's a heavy question.
And I know I've been verbose, but I guess simply put, all I'm trying to say is, if you had to say something to young men and young ladies today in terms of their behaviors, so that they would not end up being in the system, what would you say to them?
What they do today is bigger than them. It impacts on other people. Whether they realize it or not, it has a strong and a detrimental or beneficial impact on others. From my perspective, when you realize that your behavior will have an impact on someone else, and it's not just about you, it's not just about the instant gratification, then that somewhat tempers your behavior. That's my belief. With respect to working as a prosecutor and seeing people put into the system, and seeing African Americans put into the system, or people of color put into the system, and how I reconcile that with my job, I have to say that's what fortifies me in my job. I am so fortunate to be working at the DA's office, and in particular the DA's office in New York County, the one that I actually am employed at, because of the culture that's fostered there. It's protecting the public through legal means, and that is your highest calling. That is something that you feel with every fiber of your being. So when I see people come through the system, it's a matter of, okay, how do I investigate this case? How do I ensure that justice is being done? And I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to have been given this trust where I can go in and I can make sure that the investigation is being done properly, that this is not just being put on a person because of a bunch of circumstantial evidence. This is actually the person who our evidence shows did this crime. Like the objective evidence shows that did this crime. And this office has a long history. In spite of some things that people may think about this office has a long history of putting justice in front of everything else and blindly putting justice in front of everything else. So it's part of my identity, and what I want to give back to society and to people of color is what I do every single day, going through these and investigating the cases and looking at everything and every piece of evidence and sending my cops back out, making sure that we have certain evidence, making sure that certain evidence is trustworthy, and trying the case. Because if you try the case, at the end of the day, whether the perpetrator is of color or not, that person has hurt another person. And the thing is, in New York County, more often than not, the person who is victimized is another person of color.
Right, exactly.
And so it's my responsibility to the victim to make their streets safer, but it's also my responsibility to New York State in general to make sure that this person, the perpetrator, is either removed from society until such time as they can be reintegrated and to be a positive influence on society, or to figure out what can be done to make this person a positive influence on society. How do we do that? How do we make this person not go back out there and hurt other people? And the great thing about my office is my office has a full understanding that this is not a piecemeal type of program or type of social issue. It's a comprehensive issue. It has to be attacked from a bunch of different angles. And so my office is what allows me to come here today. My office allows me, fosters my communication with the public, because it understands the public needs to understand what we do and see who we are, see the face of justice. And that the face could be me, the face could be Asian, the face could be Latino, the face can be Caucasian. This office places a premium on the public understanding that we are here for them. And in our minds, we are seeking that utopia, that perfect world where everything goes as it should. And fairness is uniform and fairness is blind, where people are all safe and people are all protected and people have a voice. That is what this office's mission is, and that's what makes it so wonderful for me to be working here. And that's how I'm able to work here and reconcile all the social injustices that are around us, because I know that I'm working to make sure that, at least with respect to the criminal prosecution aspect, these injustices are minimized and soon, hopefully, will go away.
Well,
that was really verbose, I'm sorry.
I personally feel that it's imperative that especially people of color, be a part of this system and the process, because I think they bring a certain sensitivity. And what better way to ensure justice than having someone, having that rainbow, having people of color as an integral part of that system so that they can ensure that justice is in fact served. Right. But getting back to you personally, I only have a few more questions. Okay. One, are you some uniquely brilliant woman?
I like to think so. No, I'm just joking.
so that you could just breeze through law school, and you could get through college without having to struggle and suffer like us mere mortals. What is it? What does it take to become an attorney, a lawyer? What gave you the wherewithal to persevere? What were your nights like? When did you decide that you wanted to be a lawyer? And when did you decide that you wanted to be a prosecutor?
Okay, a couple of questions in there. What allowed me to persevere? My sense of social responsibility. I felt that I was given an opportunity that lots of other people have not been given, and I owed it to my family, I owed it to my culture, I owed it to the larger population of my culture to rise to that. I didn't really have the right to not try. And so I tried, and it's scary. It's scary the whole entire time because you don't know if you're good enough. You don't know if you're going to succeed. You are told pretty much by everyone that you're not good enough, and you still have to just say, well, I have to try. And so I don't remember actually ever saying, no, I got this. No, I'm 100% good at this. My mantra has always been, well, I have to try. And I've been fortunate in that I've been good at certain things, but I didn't go into it knowing that I was going to be good at it. And what kind of keeps me going as far as achieving more and more within my career, I feel, is this, well, I need to try. Well, there's this new aspect, and I need to try. I owe it to myself. I owe it to my family. I owe it to my culture. I owe it to try. So I'll try. And if I fail, I can say, okay, this didn't work out this way because A, B, and C, and learn from that. So that next endeavor, I know to tweak certain things or to minimize certain aspects. I know how to approach the next endeavor. So that's kind of my mantra, and something I'm actually trying to pass on to my kids, that just try. Even if you fail, even if you fall flat on your face, even if you end up bloody, just try.
Speaking of kids,
yeah,
as you raise them, practically, what is your approach? Is there anything that we who listen to you can perhaps glean or learn from what you do with your young people, with your children?
Oh my gosh. I think if I had the answer to that question, to how to raise successful kids or successful, wholesome people, I would be a bazillionaire because I would sell that. I don't know. I can say things that I do, but there's just this hope that it succeeds. You don't know.
Well, do you let them watch television? Do you let them eat candy? Do you allow them to stay up past 12 o'clock?
Okay.
On
a very practical level, I do, they are a lot, I'm culturally Haitian, and so I do allow them to understand who they are and where they came from, and I find that because they're so young, the way for them to do that is through media. So I do on certain days they are allowed to watch a certain amount of TV, but it's something that I've already gone through. I've actually censored and I've approved of what they're going to watch. And I will let them watch certain things that they think is just entertaining, but then we'll have discussions about it afterwards. I feel as if I can't just impose upon them their cultural background, their cultural heritage. I have to make them identify with it and make them want to learn more about it. And so this is kind of my way of doing that. So I do let them watch TV based on that, but not that much television at all. They just don't have any time. They're so booked.
So you would say that you have to create an environment where your children are really, as you say, booked.
Yes.
Their time is really spoken for.
Correct.
Keep them busy.
Correct.
Okay.
That's definitely what I would say. Keep them busy, but also listen to them to see what their interests are so that you can use their interests to give them the foundations that you want them to have.
Okay. And I guess the question I'm really asking, it relates to your parents.
Okay.
Because they did some things that obviously, shaped you and allowed you to be the person that you are.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that translates into something that you're doing with your children.
It definitely does, yes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it definitely does. It's funny because while you're growing up and your parents are doing these things and your parents are being super strict, it's not as if I was happy about it. I was super resentful, and I wanted to go out and play with my friends, and I wanted to watch more TV, and I didn't understand why it was 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and I had to go through my math drills. Why do I have to do that? I'm 7 years old. I don't need to know how to multiply for another 2 years. Why are you bothering me about this? I remember my dad's like, 4 times 4! But And you say to yourself, as you're growing up and as you're going through these struggles with your parents, as your parents are trying to do their best for you, you say to yourself, I don't like that. When I have kids, I'm not going to do that. And I think everybody does that. And then you have kids, and suddenly it makes sense why they did what they did. And you find yourself doing a lot of the same things that they did for the same reasons. And you hope to God that at some point your child is going to get to the point where, one, they benefit from everything that you're doing, but two, they understand why, and it doesn't harm your relationship with your child.
You know, there are only a couple more questions, and as I listen to you, particularly as you talk about your mother, I just, and parents, there's so many thoughts that come into my head. In fact, as I was listening to you, I thought about my mother on wash day, and this big tin pot, and because she made our soap, and with this washboard scrubbing, and I just remember her saying, and I guess I should paraphrase Langston Hughes when he says, well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. You know, it's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor bare, but all the time I've been climbing on. And I guess what I'm trying to imply, or maybe, well, perhaps even more than an implication, to be explicit about it, is that ultimately life for many of us, particularly our people, it hasn't been a crystal stair. And we've had to struggle. Because in the last line of that poem, Langston says, so boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps because you find it kind of hard. Because I still going, honey. I still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair.
Right.
So as I listen to you, those thoughts, they're kind of, they're circling inside of my spiritual gut, for want of a better way to say it. And I just have one other question for you. And again, I appreciate the fact that I can sit here and look you in the eye and talk to you. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is to influence young brothers and sisters, young people, anybody who will see this conversation, to influence them in a way that will allow them to embrace themselves and struggle to be the best that they can possibly be, to encourage them, to inspire them. That is why I've asked you here. So my final question is this. What advice would you give young people who, in fact, are trying to make their way? Some of the young people that you spoke to today, and at the risk of being redundant, because I may have asked you this before,
okay.
what would you say to them?
I mean, in addition to the things that we spoke of earlier, in following up on the Langston Hughes poem, I would say that, and this may sound harsh, but this is something that I tell myself when I just feel like I'm too tired and I just want to watch 15 hours of TV straight, but I know I can't, because TV is really tempting. It's really tempting. When I feel like I have had enough and I'm just complaining, and this is like, why do I have to do this? Why do I have to deal with that? I think, okay, you're not being whipped. You're not being lynched. You're not being prevented from going where you want to go. You're not in a boat somewhere in the Atlantic hoping to God you don't get eaten by sharks. You're complaining because you had a bad subway ride. Really? Are you that big of a wuss? Just get yourself up. And that's how I feel. It's not as if it's been a smooth ride this whole entire time for me. It hasn't. It's just that whenever I'm faced with some obstacle that I think I cannot overcome, I realize that people before me overcame so much. And at this point, that's less that I have to deal with. So what am I complaining about? Just get up. Soldier up, get up and do it. That's kind of my philosophy of life. And so that's what I would tell other kids. And I know that there are a lot of kids dealing with a lot of really horrific things. And this I know because, in particular, because of the type of work that I do. So you see how horrible mankind can be to mankind. So I know that some of these kids are going through atrocious things, but at the end of the day, you're going to be left with yourself. And regardless of what else is going on, you have to figure out how to soldier up, or that's it. It's your life. There's just one of it. You're gonna have to figure out how to reach out, get the help that you need to soldier up. And I know it's difficult, and I know that I'm there, and I know that my office is so receptive. You can come in off of the street and say, look, this is what's going on. And you will find somebody there who's gonna listen to you and try to give you the legal guidance or point you towards our social service division, which is WASU, in order to assist you. That's part of why I love what I do. At some point, you're going to have to soldier up.
Well, you know, again, as I listen to you, and we're going to bring this full circle, I have a couple of other thoughts, and I remember, I don't recall if it was a poet, but she said, or the person said, having a child is like having your heart outside of your body. And somehow I always juxtapose that with a quote from a verse from Proverbs. I don't remember what verse, but it says, above all else, protect your heart. It is where your life comes from. And if our children are our hearts, we have to protect them. And that's what this conversation has been about, to try and engage in some kind of dialogue or conversation that will help anyone who sees it to understand that our children are our hearts, and we have to protect them, otherwise we won't have life.
Right.
So I thank you very much, and I ask you to indulge me for just another minute.
Sure.
I came across another, these things are just coming to me as I listen to you and as I look at you. There was a Cherokee saying which says that when we are born, we cry and people rejoice. Mm-hmm. Live your life so that when you die, you rejoice and people cry.
I like that. I like that a lot.
And having said that, I'm hoping that we can encourage and inspire all of the young brothers and sisters who see this, to be like you, a woman of substance. And again, on behalf of this moment, I sincerely thank you for allowing me to sit here and have this conversation with you in the middle of Black History Month 2013. Carter G. Woodson would be proud.
Thank you so much.
So thank you.
Thank you.